It's safe to say that Sony doesn't follow the crowd when it comes to building and manufacturing smartphones. It dances to the beat of its own drum, and has done for quite a number of years, offering something that's niche rather than something for the general public. With the Xperia Pro-I, it wanted to offer a photography and videography tool for those with some experience. But does this approach alienate too many people? I'm Cam Bunton from Pocket-lint, and this is our review. And while you're here, if you could hit like, subscribe and tap the notification bell, that would be lovely. For a good while now, Sony's approach to design has very much been centered on the ideas of simplicity, clean lines and practicality, often sticking with features long since abandoned by big-name smartphone makers. It's no surprise then that this same approach is clearly evident in the Xperia Pro-I, which is in essence a tweaked version of the Xperia 1.3. That means you get a super slim, flat-bodied phone that's so very classy to look at and feels great thanks to that soft matte finished black glass on the back. To distinguish itself from its sibling, it has a subtle grooved finish around the metal edges, and the camera unit has been completely redesigned to incorporate the new sensor, which we'll get to a bit more later. Still, it's a darn sight more attractive and purposeful in its design compared to most phones, especially those that have their lenses stuck in a rectangle in the corner. Its central position also gives it a pleasing sense of symmetry. For those who like old school peripherals like wired headphones, wrist loop straps and physical media, Sony has you covered here too. There's a 3.5mm port for plugging in your favourite wired headphones or any other audio cable, plus a slot for a micro SD card in the SIM tray which you can remove without the need for an ejector tool. And even a little loop for attaching a strap. Sony has you covered on the buttons front too, although this isn't always brilliant. There's a physical fingerprint sensor on the side, which is great and works well when you mean to use it, but it is really easy to touch accidentally, registering a failed attempt to unlock the phone. Too many of those and you're forced to use the PIN code to log in. It's a similar situation with the dedicated camera shutter button. It's fantastic to have a button on the frame for activating the shutter with your fingers away from the screen. But there's an issue when holding a locked phone in portrait mode. It's really easy to accidentally squeeze it with your palm and launch the camera without meaning to. There's still lots to like though. It's both IP65 and IP68 water and dust resistant, and we're quite happy with the decision not to push the screen right to the edges on the top and the bottom, giving a little bit of bezel to hide the front-facing camera and the stereo speakers. They're not chunky, and they mean there's nothing disturbing that glorious, expansive cinematic display. So onto the display, and this is another area where Sony likes to do things a little bit differently. Rather than the usual 1080p or Quad HD resolution panel, Sony's kept to its guns and stuck a 4K resolution screen in there. At 643 pixels per inch, it's among the sharpest resolution displays on any smartphone. Plus, with up to 120Hz refresh rate, it's among the smoothest too. It's a great display, offering good brightness levels and impressive colour gamut coverage. Similar to some of the more modern flagship screens, it offers support for over 1 billion colours. And with Sony aiming at the pro market, it has a creator mode profile to give you 10-bit colour HDR coverage and give you an image that's as the creator intended, or so they say. The idea though is that you see movies and videos the way they're supposed to be seen. For watching Netflix, Disney Plus and the like, the sense you get is that the dynamic range and colours on offer are superb. It's a really good panel for consuming and creating media on. It just seems really nicely tuned without oversaturation or contrast-heavy visuals. It's well balanced and joined by stereo speakers on either side that help lift that immersive factor, although they're not the best stereo speakers we've ever heard. They don't seem as immersive or as full sounding as the likes of the Asus ROG Phone 5, as an example. The downside, if you can call it that, is that most mobile streaming services don't have 4K resolution support, so you don't often get to experience the fullness of that resolution on offer. And the 21:9 ratio isn't always useful. It can mean on games and some videos that you either have to zoom in and cut things out, or end up with quite heavy letterboxing and pillarboxing on the sides. And there's an argument to be had that 4K seems a bit of a waste on a screen this small, but we have no complaints really about the way it looks or performs. As phones go, the Xperia Pro-I is fast enough when it comes to general everyday performance. It's a flagship phone and it feels like one. The interface glides effortlessly under the fingers and apps open quickly, loading data without much waiting around. And once you're playing a game, it seems really responsive to touch and gestures. There's no real noticeable lag or delay. The one thing that did strike me was how warm the phone gets after a little while using it. Play games for 10 or 20 minutes and the rear of the device gets noticeably warmer. It's not too hot to hold comfortably, but it feels warmer than it should. And there's nothing really to shout home about when it comes to battery performance either. It will get you through a full day, but not much more than that. And that's because the standby time is surprisingly poor. In our experience, the standby life is among the worst we've used for quite a few years. Left overnight, the unit can often drop over 20%, just sat doing nothing. We never managed to identify anything specific that was draining it, but it's really out of the ordinary, especially with Android 11's battery optimizations. Once emptied though, it charges quickly enough and features optimized charging for nighttime, ensuring you have a full battery by the time you wake up without charging it too quick all the time, extending the life of your battery. Sadly though, on this model you don't get the convenience of wireless charging. Now moving on to cameras and dealing with the elephant in the room first, the 1.0 type sensor. If it was used in its fullest, it would be about 20 megapixels, but it's not, it's 12, because Sony has cropped quite heavily into it to give us this camera on a smartphone. We're not entirely sure of the reasons why, but the results are actually really good from the primary camera, obviously depending on your preferences. We like the color profile from it, and we found it took photos with rich color that didn't seem oversaturated and without the heavy HDR effect you often get from other smartphones. The contrast isn't too heavy and you don't get that over-sharpened look. Photos have that look of a proper photograph, like it was printed on film almost, rather than that oversaturated contrasty image you usually see all over Instagram. And that, for many, is a good thing. Now, being a pro camera means you get all the usual pro controls. You can switch to basic mode though if you want to, shooting in auto, and get great results in most light conditions. However, you also get all the manual controls you need to adjust ISO, shutter speed and white balance. You get those same controls for video too, and one I particularly found useful was manual focus, allowing you to have that manual control and create a lovely slow pull focus effect. Being Sony means you also get some really smart autofocus and tracking, with smart eye tracking and quick focusing in both video and photo modes. Now, Sony does seem to push more towards this manual control, especially when it comes to videography, offering 3 different apps that you can use to shoot video with. But it's not the most user-friendly experience, and one that could put off buyers who maybe aren't experienced with manually controlling all those elements. And the interface of those isn't especially intuitive either, even for someone who is used to manual controls in dedicated cameras. Now, once you get over that learning curve, it does mean you get a deeper understanding of how to control different aspects of a camera. But in a world where machine learning and processing has learned to do it all for us, we suspect that's a learning curve too far for most people. Now, Sony isn't particularly hiding the fact that it's going niche with the Sony Xperia Pro-I. If you want a phone with professional level tools for videography and photography, it's certainly worth considering. It's one of the nicest looking and well equipped phones on the market, but it's not perfect and it is very expensive. We suspect that for most people who are looking for a good smartphone that easily takes good pictures, it's not one that they're really going to consider. You can save a lot of money and get great photos from a Pixel 6 or a Pixel 6 Pro. But for enthusiasts who are really into controlling all aspects of their phone, it's certainly worth looking at. I've been Cam, I'm at Cam Bunton on social media. If you want to get hold of me on there, you can do. Don't forget, if you did like this video, please do leave a thumbs up, subscribe and tap the notification bell, and that way you don't miss any more of our videos. I'll see you again in the next one. Bye for now.